Blood stained the wooden floor of the dusty saloon as Mary Farley gripped her infant daughter tightly to her chest, watching her husband's last breath leave his body. It was 1878 in Guthrie, Oklahoma Territory, a land that promised so much but had delivered only heartache since they'd arrived 6 months ago. "Aaron," she whispered, her voice breaking as she knelt beside him, careful not to jostle the sleeping baby. The gunshot that had killed him still echoed in her ears, mixing with the shouting of the fleeing outlaw and the commotion of onlookers. "Somebody get Doc Wilson," someone called out, but Mary knew it was too late. Her husband's eyes stared emptily at the ceiling, his dreams of building a cattle ranch dying with him. At 22, Mary was now a widow in a frontier town that barely acknowledged her existence when Aaron was alive. Now, with a 3-month-old daughter and barely enough money to last a week, she felt the weight of an uncertain future crushing down on her. "Mrs. Farley, you can't stay here," Sheriff Patterson said, his voice gruff but not unkind. He removed his hat, revealing thinning gray hair. "We'll take care of your husband's arrangements." Mary nodded numbly, cradling little Sarah closer as she stood. The baby remained asleep, blissfully unaware that her life had just changed forever. "That bastard Riker will pay for this," the sheriff continued. "I'll send word to Fort Smith. The marshals will bring him to justice." Justice. The word felt hollow. What justice could there be that would bring Aaron back? That would give Sarah her father outside the saloon. The setting sun painted Guthrie's main street in golden light. The town was only a few years old, but it had already developed the hardened character of the frontier, a place where life and death existed in precarious balance. Wooden buildings lined the dusty street, their fresh-cut lumber still fragrant in the evening air. Horses stood hitched to posts, and men moved with purpose between the general store, the bank, and the saloon. Mary made her way to the boarding house where they'd been staying since arriving from Missouri. Mrs. Holloway, the stern-faced proprietress, met her at the door. "I heard," the older woman said simply. "Come in, child." Inside her small room, Mary placed Sarah in the wooden cradle Aaron had crafted during the long journey west. The baby stirred but didn't wake, her tiny fists curled by her face. Mary collapsed onto the narrow bed, still wearing her blood-splattered dress, and stared at the ceiling. 3 days later, after Aaron was buried in the small cemetery on the edge of town, Mary counted their remaining money on the bed. $28.16. The cost of a coffin and burial had depleted their savings. Aaron had invested everything else in cattle and land that was now contested by another rancher. Without her husband to defend their claim, Mary knew she stood little chance of keeping it. A knock at the door interrupted her calculations. Mrs. Holloway stood in the hallway, her usual severe expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Farley, there's someone asking after you." "A Mr. Blake Zimmerman." Mary frowned. The name wasn't familiar. "Who is he?" "Says he was a friend of your husband's, from his ranching days in Texas." Mary smoothed her black mourning dress and checked on Sarah, who was contentedly chewing on her fist. "Send him up, please." The man who entered moments later filled the doorframe. Tall and broad-shouldered, he removed his hat to reveal sun-bleached brown hair and a face weathered by years in the elements. He couldn't have been more than 30, but his blue eyes carried the weariness of someone who had seen far more than his years should allow. "Mrs. Farley," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "I'm Blake Zimmerman. I rode with your husband on the good-night-loving trail 3 years back." Mary gestured to the room's only chair. "Please sit, Mr. Zimmerman." Blake perched awkwardly on the small wooden chair, his large frame making the furniture seem child-sized. "I heard about Aaron in Dodge City. Rode straight here." He twisted his hat in his hands. He was a good man. Yes, Mary agreed, her throat tightening. He was. I also heard that Riker is trying to claim your land. Mary's expression hardened. Victor Riker has been trying to buy our claim since we arrived. Aaron refused to sell. Now Riker says our paperwork is invalid, that Aaron's signature on the deed isn't properly witnessed. Blake nodded grimly. Riker has the territorial judge in his pocket. He's been pushing out small ranchers all across this region. Are you suggesting he had something to do with my husband's death? Mary asked, her voice barely a whisper as she glanced at Sarah. Blake placed his hat on his knee. I'm not suggesting anything, madam, just stating facts as I know them. He cleared his throat. I came because Aaron once did me a good turn, saved my life during a river crossing gone bad. I figured I owed him. Mary studied the cowboy. His clothes were worn but clean, his manner respectful. Aaron had never mentioned him, but then Aaron rarely spoke of his days on the cattle drives. That's kind of you, Mr. Zimmerman, but I'm not sure what help you can provide. I've decided to sell what I can and return east to my parents in Missouri. Blake frowned. That land is good grazing territory, worth fighting for. I have a child to consider, Mary said, gesturing to Sarah, and no means to work a ranch. I've been foreman on 3 different spreads, Blake said. I know cattle, I know ranching. He leaned forward. Let me help you get established. Just until you can hire proper hands. Mary laughed bitterly. And how would I pay these hands, or you for that matter? I don't need payment, just a place to settle for a spell. His eyes met hers directly. I've been drifting too long, Mrs. Farley, and I owed your husband. Before Mary could respond, Sarah began to fuss. Mary lifted her from the cradle, bouncing her gently. Blake stood. Think on it. I'll be at the hotel down the street if you decide you want my help. After he left, Mary sat by the window, watching as Blake Zimmerman crossed the street. His confident stride and straight posture marked him as a man comfortable with himself, but there was something else, a deliberateness to his movements that spoke of caution. Of a man who had learned to watch his back. That night, as Mary fed Sarah and prepared for bed, she weighed her options. Return east to parents who had opposed her marriage and would surely view her return as confirmation of their judgment. Or stay and fight for the land that had cost her husband's life. The next morning, Mary found Blake at the hotel's small dining room. He stood when he saw her, gesturing to the chair across from him. I've decided to accept your help, Mr. Zimmerman, Mary said without preamble. But I need to understand what that entails. Blake nodded, pouring her a cup of coffee from the pot on the table. First, we need to secure your legal claim. Then we assess what stock you have and what you need. Build shelter, cut hay for winter, hire good men. He sipped his coffee. It won't be easy. Nothing about this territory is easy, Mary replied, but I need to be clear this is a business arrangement. I'll provide room and board and when I can, wages. Fair enough. He extended his hand across the table. Partners then. Mary hesitated before shaking his hand. His palm was calloused, his grip firm but careful. There's something else you should know, Blake said, releasing her hand. Riker's not just a businessman, he's dangerous, and he doesn't like losing. I'm already a widow, Mr. Zimmerman. What more can he take from me? Blake's expression darkened. Let's make sure we don't find out. That afternoon, they rode out to the land. The claim was 15 miles outside of Guthrie, nestled against rolling hills with a creek running through it. The cabin Aaron had started building was little more than a foundation and framework, with a temporary canvas roof. It's not much, Mary said, holding Sarah against her shoulder as they surveyed the property from horseback. It's a start, Blake replied. Good water, good grass. Your husband chose well. They spent the day taking stock. Aaron had purchased 30 head of cattle, which were now grazing in the northern section of the property. The tools were basic but serviceable. There was enough lumber to finish the cabin's roof and walls. As the sun began to set, Mary felt a growing unease. We should get back to town before dark. Blake nodded, helping her mount her horse while she secured Sarah in a sling across her chest. They were halfway back to Guthrie when Blake suddenly raised his hand, signaling her to stop. "Riders coming," he said quietly. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the horizon. 3 horsemen approached, silhouetted against the darkening sky. As they drew closer, Mary recognized the man in front, Victor Riker. He was in his 40s, prosperously built, with a neatly trimmed beard and expensive clothes. "Mrs. Farley," Riker called out, his voice artificially pleasant. "And who might this be?" "Blake Zimmerman," Blake answered before Mary could speak. "Mrs. Farley's new foreman." Riker's eyebrows rose. "Is that so? I was under the impression the widow was selling out." "You were mistaken," Mary said coolly. Riker's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's unfortunate. I've already filed papers contesting your claim. It would be simpler and safer for everyone if you reconsidered my offer." "The land's not for sale," Blake said, shifting his horse slightly to position himself between Mary and Riker's men. "Everything's for sale, Cowboy," Riker replied. "It's just a matter of price." His gaze shifted to Mary, or more specifically to Sarah. "A woman alone with a child should consider her situation carefully. The frontier is no place for the vulnerable." Mary felt a chill at the barely veiled threat. "We'll be going now, Mr. Riker." "Of course." Riker tipped his hat. "Think about what I said. My offer stands until the end of the week. After that." He shrugged eloquently. As they rode away, Mary glanced back to see Riker and his men watching them. "He's trying to frighten you," Blake said quietly. "He's succeeding," Mary admitted. They reached Guthrie as darkness fell. Blake escorted Mary and Sarah to the boarding house before heading to the hotel. At the door, he paused. "I'll come by at sunrise. We've got a cabin to build." The next week passed in a blur of activity. Blake worked from dawn until dusk on the cabin, with Mary helping when Sarah was asleep. They hired 2 local men to assist, brothers named James and Thomas Harrington, who had experience with both carpentry and cattle. By week's end, the cabin had solid walls, a proper roof, and basic furniture that Blake crafted from excess lumber. It wasn't fancy, but it would keep them dry and warm. "We should move you and Sarah out here tomorrow," Blake said as they stood admiring their work. "It's not safe for you in town with Riker making threats." Mary nodded, bouncing Sarah on her hip. The baby had grown fond of Blake, smiling whenever he spoke. "What about Riker's legal challenge?" "Sheriff Patterson says the territorial judge is due in town next week." "We'll present your case then." Blake's expression was grim, but judges can be bought. "Then what hope do we have?" "Justice doesn't always come from courtrooms, Mrs. Farley." His voice had hardened. "Sometimes it has to be made by other means." Mary studied him. "You're not just a cowboy, are you, Mr. Zimmerman?" Blake met her gaze. "I've been many things. Right now, I'm your foreman." That night, as Mary packed her few belongings at the boarding house, Mrs. Holloway appeared at her door. "You're making a mistake, child," the older woman said. "Going out there alone with that man." "Mr. Zimmerman was my husband's friend," Mary replied, folding a dress into her trunk. Mrs. Holloway snorted. "Men like that don't have friends, they have debts and enemies." She lowered her voice. "There's talk he used to ride with Baker's gang down in Texas, that he killed men." Mary's hands stilled over her packing. "Do you believe everything you hear, Mrs. Holloway?" "I believe what my eyes tell me, and that man has death in his eyes." After the landlady left, Mary sat on the edge of her bed, watching Sarah sleep. Was she making a terrible mistake, trusting a stranger on nothing more than his word that he'd known Aaron? But what choice did she have? The next morning, Blake arrived with a wagon for their belongings. His expression gave nothing away as he loaded Mary's trunk and helped her secure Sarah for the journey. They were halfway to the ranch when Mary finally spoke. "Were you an outlaw, Mr. Zimmerman?" Blake's hands tightened on the reins, but his voice remained even. "Would it matter if I was?" "It might." He was silent for so long that Mary thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he sighed. "I rode with men who broke the law, yes. After the war, there wasn't much work for former Confederate soldiers in Texas." His jaw tightened. "But I never killed except in self-defense, and I never stole from folks who couldn't afford the loss. And now I'm trying to make amends." He glanced at her. "Your husband helped me see that there were better paths." Mary absorbed this. "I appreciate your honesty." "If you want me to leave, no," she interrupted. "We need you. I just needed to know." The cabin looked smaller than Mary remembered, but Blake had added touches that made it more homely: curtains made from sacking at the windows, a rocking chair by the fireplace, shelves for her few belongings. "It's not much," he said, echoing her earlier words. "It's a start," she replied, repeating his. Life settled into a rhythm over the following days. Blake and the Harrington brothers worked on expanding the cattle operation while Mary established their home. Sarah thrived in the fresh air, growing stronger each day. The territorial judge arrived in Guthrie as promised. Blake accompanied Mary to town for the hearing, leaving Sarah in the care of James Harrington's wife. Judge Franklin Hollister was a portly man with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He listened impassively as Riker's lawyer presented their case, claiming that Aaron's land purchase had not been properly registered. When it was Mary's turn, she produced the deed with Aaron's signature, along with a letter from the land office confirming the transaction. "The witness to the signature is deceased," Riker's lawyer pointed out. "How can we verify its authenticity?" "If I may, Your Honor," Blake stepped forward. "I can provide testimony that Aaron Farley purchased this land legally. I accompanied him to the land office in April." Mary turned to him in surprise. Blake had never mentioned being with Aaron during the purchase. The judge studied Blake. "You're under oath, Mr. Zimmerman. Are you prepared to swear to this?" "I am, Your Honor." Riker stood, his face flushed with anger. "This is preposterous. This man is clearly lying to protect the widow." "Careful, Mr. Riker," the judge warned. "Accusations of perjury are serious." After hearing both sides, the judge retired to consider his decision. As they waited outside the courthouse, Mary confronted Blake. "You weren't with Aaron when he bought the land. You told me you hadn't seen him in years." Blake's eyes remained on the courthouse door. "I said what needed saying. You lied under oath." "Sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing, Mrs. Farley." He finally looked at her. "Riker bribed the land office clerk to lose your original filing. I'm just evening the odds." Before Mary could respond, they were called back inside. The judge looked grave as he delivered his ruling. "After careful consideration of the evidence presented, I find in favor of Mrs. Farley. The land claim is valid and legally binding." He banged his gavel, ignoring Riker's protests. Outside, Mary was torn between relief and concern. "What if Riker discovers you weren't really there?" "He won't," Blake said confidently. "And even if he suspected, he couldn't prove it." Riker emerged from the courthouse, his expression thunderous. He stalked over to them, stopping inches from Blake. "This isn't over," he hissed. "Nobody makes a fool of me in my own territory." Blake stood his ground. "The judge has ruled, Riker. The land belongs to Mrs. Farley. Enjoy your victory while it lasts." Riker's gaze shifted to Mary. "Both of you." As they rode back to the ranch, Mary's relief gradually gave way to worry. "He won't stop, will he?" Blake shook his head. "Men like Riker don't know how to lose. We'll need to be vigilant." The threat materialized 3 nights later. Mary was awakened by the sound of gunfire. She rushed to Sarah's cradle, scooping up the startled baby as Blake burst through the door. "Stay down," he ordered, his gun drawn. "Riker's men are trying to stampede the cattle." Through the window, Mary could see flames in the distance, a line of fire being set to panic the herd. The Harrington brothers were visible as silhouettes, firing at shadowy figures on horseback. Blake slipped out the door, moving with surprising stealth for such a large man. Mary huddled in the corner with Sarah, trying to soothe the frightened child as gunshots echoed across the property. It seemed like hours before Blake returned, his face smudged with soot and a bloody gash on his arm. "Are you hurt badly?" Mary asked, setting Sarah down to examine his wound. "Just a graze." He winced as she probed the injury. "We drove them off, but they scattered about a third of the herd. We'll round them up at first light. And the Harringtons," James took a bullet in the leg, "Thomas is patching him up at their cabin." Blake's expression was grim. "This is just the beginning, Mary. Riker won't stop until he gets what he wants." It was the first time he had used her given name, and something in his voice made her look up. His blue eyes held a mixture of concern and something deeper. "We'll protect what's ours," she said firmly, bandaging his arm. "Yes," he agreed softly. "We will." The next morning revealed the extent of the damage. Besides the scattered cattle, Riker's men had burned a section of fence and poisoned one of the water troughs, killing 3 cows. "It could have been worse," Thomas Harrington said as they surveyed the damage, "if Blake hadn't spotted them coming." "How did you know?" Mary asked Blake as they walked back to the cabin. He hesitated. "I've been sleeping in the barn. After Riker's threats, I thought it wise to keep watch." Mary stopped walking. "You've been sleeping in the barn all this time?" Blake shrugged, embarrassed. It seemed prudent. Mary considered this man who had come into their lives so unexpectedly, who had worked tirelessly, risked his safety, even perjured himself, all for a woman and child he barely knew. "That ends tonight," she said firmly. "There's a perfectly good second room in the cabin. I won't have you sleeping with the horses when we have Riker's men to worry about." The weeks that followed brought more harassment from Riker, though nothing as dramatic as the night raid. Supplies ordered from town went missing. Anonymous threats were nailed to their fence posts. A dead calf was left on their doorstep. Through it all, Blake remained a steady presence. He taught Mary to shoot, insisted on accompanying her whenever she went to town, and continued improving the ranch. A barn rose beside the cabin. The herd grew as new calves were born, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, Mary's feelings for Blake began to change. It wasn't just gratitude, though she was certainly thankful. It wasn't just admiration for his skills, though she admired them greatly. It was something deeper, a connection that grew from shared purpose and mutual respect. She noticed the gentle way he handled Sarah, telling the baby stories as he rocked her to sleep. She observed his patience with the Harrington brothers, teaching rather than commanding. She appreciated his respect for her decisions, offering advice but never insisting. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah asleep in her cradle beside them, Blake broke their comfortable silence. "I've been thinking," he said, his eyes on the horizon. "About Riker," Mary sighed. "He's been quiet lately, almost too quiet." "That's what concerns me." Blake turned to face her. "I think we should consider selling after all." Mary stared at him. "Selling after everything we've done, everything you've done. Hear me out." His voice was gentle but firm. "Riker has connections throughout the territory. He's patient and vindictive. This land isn't worth your life or Sarah's. So we just give up. Let him win." Mary stood, anger rising in her chest. "This land is all I have left of Aaron. It's Sarah's future. There's land elsewhere. safer places to raise a child. I can't believe you're saying this. Mary's disappointment felt like a physical pain. I thought you understood what we're fighting for. Blake stood too, his expression troubled. I understand all too well, that's why I'm suggesting it. He stepped closer. Mary, I've seen men like Riker before. They don't stop, ever. Then we'll keep fighting, she insisted. At what cost? His voice rose slightly before he controlled it, glancing at the sleeping baby. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you, to either of you. The raw emotion in his voice silenced her. They stood facing each other in the gathering dusk, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Blake, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Why did you really come here? Was it truly just because of a debt to Aaron? He looked away, his profile strong against the darkening sky. At first, yes. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. But now, he trailed off. Now, she prompted. Blake took a deep breath, meeting her eyes. Now I stay because I can't imagine being anywhere else. Because this place you and Sarah have become home to me. Mary's heart quickened. What are you saying, Blake? I'm saying that I care for you, Mary, more than I should, perhaps. His voice was rough with emotion. And that my concern for your safety isn't just about a promise to a dead man. It's about protecting what's become precious to me. Mary stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. We're not selling, she said softly. This is our home. We'll face whatever comes together. Blake's expression was a mixture of frustration and tenderness. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. So I've been told, she replied with a small smile. He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The simple touch sent warmth cascading through her. I should check the perimeter before full dark, he said, his voice husky. Yes, she agreed, though neither of them moved. The moment was broken by Sarah's whimper. Mary stepped back, turning to the cradle. She's getting hungry. Blake nodded, reaching for his rifle. I'll be back soon. As Mary fed Sarah inside the cabin, her mind was in turmoil. The feelings Blake had confessed mirrored her own growing attachment. But was it disloyal to Aaron's memory to care for another man so soon? Was it wise to open her heart when danger still surrounded them? The decision was taken from her hands the following day. Blake had ridden into town for supplies, and Mary was hanging laundry while Sarah napped in her cradle under the shade of a nearby tree. The day was warm, the sky a brilliant blue. In the distance, the cattle grazed peacefully. Mary was reaching for a shirt when the sound of approaching horses made her freeze. Turning slowly, she saw 5 riders approaching Victor Riker at their head. Her first instinct was to run for the cabin and her gun, but Sarah was still sleeping under the tree, too far away. Instead, Mary moved to stand protectively near the cradle, forcing herself to appear calmer than she felt. Mr. Riker, she said as the men reined in their horses. This is a surprise. Riker dismounted, his movements leisurely. Mrs. Farley, you're looking well. His eyes scanned the property. Where's your watchdog today? Mr. Zimmerman has business in town. Mary's mouth was dry. What can I do for you? Riker smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. I've come to make one final offer for your land, double my original price. The land isn't for sale, as I've said repeatedly. Yes, you have been quite consistent. Riker took a step closer, but circumstances have changed. Mary's hands clenched in her skirts. Oh, your protector, Mr. Zimmerman. Riker's smile widened. Did you know there's a $500 bounty on his head in Texas? For murder, among other crimes. Mary kept her expression neutral. I don't believe you. No, then perhaps you'll believe this. He gestured to one of his men who handed him a folded paper. Riker opened it, revealing a crude drawing that was unmistakably Blake, with the words wanted above it. Blake Zimmerman, also known as Blake Smith, wanted for the murder of 3 men during a bank robbery in Laredo, 1873. Riker read with evident satisfaction. A telegram to the Texas Rangers would bring them riding. I wonder how your foreman would fare in a Texas prison, or at the end of a rope. Mary's blood ran cold, but she lifted her chin defiantly. What do you want? The deed to your property, signed and witnessed by sunset tomorrow. Riker folded the wanted poster and tucked it into his jacket. In exchange, I'll forget I ever saw this interesting document. And if I refuse, then Mr. Zimmerman's past catches up with him. Riker's voice hardened. And you find yourself truly alone, Mrs. Farley, a widow with a child and no protector in a dangerous territory. Before Mary could respond, Sarah began to cry. Riker glanced at the cradle, his expression calculating. Lovely child, he said. It would be a shame if she grew up without any parents at all. The threat hung in the air between them. Mary fought to keep her voice steady. Get off my land, Mr. Riker. To her surprise, he complied, mounting his horse with a satisfied smirk. Sunset tomorrow, Mrs. Farley. The deed for your foreman's freedom. It seems a fair trade. After they rode away, Mary collapsed beside Sarah's cradle, her legs suddenly unable to support her. The baby's cries grew more insistent, and Mary gathered her into her arms, tears streaming down her face. By the time Blake returned that afternoon, Mary had composed herself. She waited until after supper when Sarah was asleep to confront him. Riker came today, she said without preamble as they sat by the fire. Blake's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Are you all right? Did he threaten you? He showed me a wanted poster. Mary watched Blake's face carefully. From Texas, for Blake Smith. The color drained from Blake's face. For a moment he looked as though he might deny it, then his shoulders sagged. I should have told you, he said quietly. Yes, you should have. Mary's voice trembled with suppressed emotion. Were you ever going to mention that you're wanted for murder? That there's a bounty on your head? Blake stood and paced to the window, staring out into the darkness. It wasn't murder, he finally said. It was self-defense. The poster said it was during a bank robbery. He turned back to her, his expression pained. Yes, I was robbing the bank. I'm not denying that, but the killing. He ran a hand through his hair. The banker pulled a shotgun. I fired without thinking. Mary closed her eyes, trying to reconcile this information with the man she'd come to know, the man who read stories to Sarah, who worked from sunrise to sunset to build their home. Riker is offering a deal, she said, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. The land for your freedom. He won't send word to Texas if I sign over the deed. Blake's jaw tightened. And you're considering it, wouldn't you? He threatened Sarah, Blake. Her voice broke. He all but said he'd make her an orphan. You can't trust him, Blake said urgently, crossing to kneel before her. Even if you sign the deed, there's nothing stopping him from sending that telegram anyway. What choice do I have? Mary demanded. I can't risk Sarah. We leave, Blake said simply. Tonight. Take what we can carry and go north. I have friends in Wyoming who would help us. And abandon everything we've built. Buildings can be rebuilt. Land can be bought. His eyes were intense. Some things are irreplaceable. Mary's heart raced at the implications. You want us to run away together. I want us to be safe. He took her hands in his. Mary, I've been running from my past for 5 years. Changing names, avoiding the law. When I heard about Aaron's death, I came because I genuinely respected him, but also because Guthrie was far from Texas and I was tired of drifting. He squeezed her hands gently. I didn't expect you. I didn't expect Sarah. I didn't expect to find a home, a purpose. His voice lowered. I didn't expect to fall in love. Mary's breath caught. Blake, let me finish. His eyes never left hers. I've done wrong in my life. I've made choices I can't undo. But these months with you, they've shown me what kind of man I want to be." He took a shaky breath. "And if that means facing my past so you and Sarah can have a future, then that's what I'll do." Mary stared at him, understanding dawning. "You're not suggesting we run away. You're suggesting you give yourself up." Blake nodded slowly. "If Riker sends that telegram, I'll be arrested, but I'll make sure the truth is known about his threats against you. It might be enough to keep him from taking your land while I'm gone. And then what? You go to prison, or worse." Mary pulled her hands from his, standing abruptly. "That's your solution. What would you have me do?" Blake stood as well, frustration evident in his voice. "Let you sign away your future, let Riker win?" "I don't know." Mary paced the small room, "but sacrificing yourself isn't the answer." "Then what is?" he challenged. Mary stopped pacing, a desperate plan forming. "We fight, on our terms, not his." Blake's expression was skeptical. "Against Riker and all his men, not with guns." Mary's mind raced. "With the law, the real law, not Riker's pet judge." She turned to Blake. "How much of what you told me about your past is true? About riding with outlaws?" Confused by the change in direction, Blake nodded. "All of it." "And you know people, other former outlaws, men who might owe you favors?" Understanding began to dawn on his face. "A few. But Mary, I can't bring that element into your life." "You already have," she pointed out. "The moment Riker threatened us with your wanted poster." She stepped closer to him. "I need to know if you trust me." "With my life," he answered without hesitation. "Good." She took a deep breath. "Because I have a plan." The next morning, Blake rode out early, heading not for town but west, toward the territories. Mary spent the day packing essentials and preparing the cabin as if for departure. When Riker arrived at sunset with his men and a nervous-looking clerk from the land office, Mary was waiting on the porch alone. "Mrs. Farley," Riker called out, dismounting with a satisfied smile. "I see you've come to your senses." "I have," Mary agreed calmly, "but not in the way you think." Riker's smile faltered. "Where's Zimmerman?" "Gone." Mary folded her hands in front of her. "He left last night after I told him about your visit." Anger flashed across Riker's face. "You let him escape." "He's not an animal to be trapped, Mr. Riker." Mary's voice was steel beneath silk. "He's a man who made mistakes and is now beyond your reach." "We'll see about that," Riker snarled, turning to one of his men. "Ride to the telegraph office. Send word to the Rangers." "You're welcome to try," Mary said, "but I think you'll find the telegraph line has been temporarily disabled." Riker's head whipped back to her, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "What game are you playing, Mrs. Farley?" "No game." Mary descended the porch steps. "Just ensuring we have time for an uninterrupted conversation." "About what?" Riker demanded. "About your own crimes, Mr. Riker." Mary withdrew a packet of papers from her pocket. "Fraud, intimidation, conspiracy to commit murder, my husband's murder." Riker's face paled slightly before he recovered his composure. "Preposterous. You have no proof." "Don't I?" Mary unfolded the papers. "These are sworn statements from men you've hired over the years. Men who were willing to talk once Blake tracked them down." She met Riker's gaze steadily. "Including the man who shot Aaron on your orders." "This is absurd," Riker blustered, but there was fear in his eyes now. "Testimonies from criminals and drifters won't stand up in court." "Perhaps not on their own," Mary agreed. "But combined with financial records showing your bribes to various officials, including Judge Hollister." She smiled thinly. "The territorial governor might take an interest." Riker stared at her, calculation replacing fear. "What do you want?" "Leave Guthrie," Mary said simply. "Sell your holdings and move on. Never come near my family again." "Or what?" Riker's voice was dangerous. "Or these papers go to every law enforcement office in the territory. And to newspapers in St. Louis, Kansas City, and Chicago." Mary's expression hardened. Your reputation would be ruined, your business interests investigated. You might escape prison with your connections, but you'd never rebuild what you'd lose. For a long moment, Riker was silent, measuring her resolve. Finally, he laughed, a harsh sound without humor. I underestimated you, Mrs. Farley. He inclined his head slightly. And your foreman. Former foreman, Mary corrected. Future husband. Surprise flickered across Riker's face before it settled into grudging respect. Well played. He remounted his horse. You'll have my answer within the week. Make it the right one, Mary called as he turned his horse. For all our sakes. 3 days later, Blake returned, looking tired but triumphant. It's done, he said as he dismounted in the yard. I found Jenkins and Williams. They both signed statements about Riker hiring them for special work, and Jenkins admitted he was there when the orders were given to kill Aaron. Mary embraced him, relief making her knees weak. Riker came. I gave him the ultimatum as we planned. Blake held her at arm's length, searching her face anxiously, and we're still waiting for his answer. She led him inside, where Sarah greeted him with excited babbles from her cradle. But I think he believed me, about the evidence, about what we do with it. Blake lifted Sarah, who grabbed at his beard happily. And the other thing you told him, about me being your future husband, Mary blushed. You heard about that, Thomas Harrington was watching from the ridge. Rode out to meet me this morning. Blake's eyes were serious despite his smile. Did you mean it, Mary? Mary hesitated, then squared her shoulders. Yes, if you're asking. Blake's smile broadened. I'm asking. He shifted Sarah to one arm and took Mary's hand with his free one. I'm asking if you'll build a life with me, if you'll let me be a father to Sarah, if you'll give me the chance to be the man you deserve. Mary felt tears spring to her eyes. Even with your past, with the risk. My past is my burden to bear, Blake said firmly. But I promise you this, I'll never run from it again. Once Riker is dealt with, I'll go to Texas and face whatever justice awaits me. What? Mary's happiness crumbled. No, Blake, you can't. I have to, he interrupted gently. I can't build a life on lies and hiding. You and Sarah deserve better than a fugitive. They could hang you. They won't. His confidence was absolute. The banker's family dropped the charges years ago when the truth came out about him embezzling from his own bank. The wanted poster Riker has is outdated, kept in circulation by a Texas Ranger with a grudge. Once I tell my side, with character witnesses and proof of the life I've built, the worst I face is a fine and maybe a few months in jail. Mary wanted to believe him. And then I come home. Blake squeezed her hand. To you and Sarah, to our ranch, to our future. 1 week later, they received word that Riker had sold his properties and departed for California. The threat he posed was gone, though Mary kept the evidence secure, insurance against his potential return. With Riker's departure, the atmosphere in the territory changed. Smaller ranchers who had been intimidated into selling reclaimed their land through legal challenges. The territorial judge was replaced after an investigation revealed numerous improprieties. Blake made good on his promise, traveling to Texas to face his outstanding charges. As he predicted, with the primary complainant no longer pursuing the case, he received a modest fine and a suspended sentence, conditional on his continued good behavior. When he returned to Oklahoma 3 weeks later, Mary and Sarah were waiting. The ranch had prospered in his absence, with the Harrington brothers stepping up to manage the increasing herd. That night, with Sarah asleep in her cradle, Mary and Blake sat together on a blanket outside the cabin. Above them, the sky was a tapestry of stars, more brilliant than any city dweller could imagine. I never thought I'd have this, Blake said quietly, his arm around Mary's shoulders. Peace. A home. A family. Mary leaned against him, content in a way she hadn't been since before Aaron's death. "Sarah adores you," she said. "She barely slept while you were gone." "Just Sarah," Blake teased gently. Mary smiled. "I may have missed you a little." He laughed softly, then grew serious. "I know I can never replace Aaron." "No," Mary agreed. "You can't, and I wouldn't want you to try." She turned to face him. "Aaron will always be Sarah's father and a part of my heart, but that doesn't mean there isn't room for you for a new love." Blake's eyes softened. "I love you, Mary Farley, more than I knew it was possible to love another person. And I love you, Blake Zimmerman." The words felt right, natural. "Enough to build a lifetime with you." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with the Harringtons and a few townspeople as witnesses. Sarah, now almost a year old, watched with solemn eyes as her mother pledged herself to the man who had become her protector and friend. That evening, as darkness fell, Blake built a fire in the yard. The autumn air was crisp, promising winter's approach, but the flames provided ample warmth as they sat together. Sarah had fallen asleep in Mary's arms, her small face peaceful in the firelight. Blake watched them both, his expression tender. "She looks like you," he observed. "Same determined chin." Mary smiled. "Poor child, let's hope she has better judgment than her mother." "Your judgment seems sound to me." Blake moved closer, his shoulder touching hers. "After all, you married me, so I did." Mary leaned her head against him, "For better or worse." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead. Sarah stirred but didn't wake, her tiny hand clutching Mary's shawl. "I was thinking," Blake said eventually, "about expanding the herd next spring, and maybe adding onto the cabin. Sarah will need her own room eventually." "And perhaps space for brothers or sisters," Mary suggested, watching his reaction from the corner of her eye. Blake's smile was radiant. "You mean, not yet," Mary clarified, "but someday if you want. Nothing would make me happier." His voice was husky with emotion. The fire crackled, sending sparks upward to meet the stars. Sarah slept peacefully, untroubled by the night or the vastness of the sky above. "We should get her inside," Mary said reluctantly. "It's getting colder." Blake nodded, but neither moved immediately. The moment felt too perfect to disturb. "Her baby slept in her arms beneath the stars," Blake murmured, his voice soft with wonder. "You'll rest in my arms tonight." Mary felt tears prick her eyes at the simple poetry of his words. "Promise." In answer, Blake stood and helped Mary to her feet, careful not to disturb Sarah. Together they walked toward the cabin, toward the warmth and safety of the home they had built. Behind them, the fire continued to burn, a beacon of light in the vast darkness of the frontier night. Ahead of them lay a future neither could have imagined 6 months earlier, a future built on second chances, hard-won trust, and love that had emerged from the ashes of tragedy. As they crossed the threshold, Blake's hand steady at the small of Mary's back, she felt a sense of rightness, of completion. This was where they belonged. Together, they would face whatever challenges the territory threw at them, whatever joys and sorrows life brought their way. Their story, like the West itself, was still being written. But tonight, beneath the endless Oklahoma sky, they had found their place in it, a small ranch on contested land, a cabin built by determined hands, a family forged not just by blood but by choice and circumstance. And as Mary laid Sarah in her cradle and turned to find Blake waiting, arms outstretched to welcome her, she knew with absolute certainty that she was finally, truly home. The years that followed brought both hardship and joy to the Zimmerman ranch. The harsh winter of 1879 tested their resolve, with blizzards that trapped them indoors for days and threatened their cattle. But spring arrived eventually, bringing new calves, fresh grass, and renewed hope. Sarah grew from a baby to a toddler, running on sturdy legs across the yard, her laughter brightening even the most difficult days. Blake doted on her, teaching her to ride a pony before she was 3, reading to her each night by the fire. In the summer of 1880, Mary gave birth to their first child together, a son they named James, after Blake's father. Sarah approached her role as big sister with serious determination, helping Mary change diapers and singing the baby to sleep with made-up songs. The territory changed around them. More settlers arrived, bringing civilization's trappings: schools, churches, proper stores. The railroad extended its reach, making it easier to ship cattle to eastern markets. Their ranch prospered, expanding to 3 times its original size as they purchased adjacent land from departing neighbors. Victor Riker remained in California, though occasionally news of his business ventures reached them. He never returned to Oklahoma, never challenged the evidence Mary held against him. Some battles, it seemed, even men like Riker knew better than to refight. On a warm evening in 1885, Mary sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching Blake teach 7-year-old Sarah how to lasso a fence post. James, now 5, cheered his sister on, while 3-year-old Rebecca clung to Mary's skirts. The baby, Thomas, slept in a cradle beside her. "Mama, look," Sarah called triumphantly as the rope settled around the post. "I did it." "Well done, sweetheart," Mary called back, smiling at Blake's obvious pride. Later, after the children were asleep, Mary and Blake sat together on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the stars emerge. "You ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't come that day?" Mary asked. "If you'd stayed in Dodge City instead of riding to Guthrie?" Blake considered this. "I'd like to think some things are meant to be, that I'd have found my way to you somehow." Mary smiled, nestling closer to him. "A romantic cowboy, who would have thought? Only with you," he assured her, kissing the top of her head. In the distance, a coyote called, its lonely cry carrying across the prairie. The ranch dogs answered with half-hearted barks before settling back to sleep. "I was thinking," Blake said after a comfortable silence, "Sarah's getting old enough for proper schooling. Maybe it's time we considered building that schoolhouse we've talked about." Mary nodded. "The Henderson children and the Wilsons' brood are of age too. There'd be enough pupils to warrant a teacher. I'll speak to Thomas Harrington about the lumber tomorrow." Blake's fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "We could have it ready by harvest time." This was their life now, making plans, building not just for themselves but for their community. The hardships of those early days had forged them into a formidable partnership, a family united by more than blood or law. As the night deepened around them, Mary thought back to that terrible day when Aaron was killed, to the despair she had felt. She could never have imagined then the fullness of the life awaiting her, the love she would find, the family she would build, the strength she would discover within herself. Blake seemed to sense her thoughts. "You're far away tonight," he murmured. "Just remembering," she replied. "And being grateful," he nodded, understanding without further explanation. After 7 years together, they often communicated in such shorthand, able to read each other's moods and thoughts with practiced ease. "Come to bed," Blake said eventually, standing and offering his hand. "Tomorrow we'll be here before we know it." Mary took his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. "And the next day and the next." "God willing," he agreed. Inside their home, the children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were protected, loved. The ranch, once just a rough claim on contested land, had become a thriving enterprise, a legacy they would one day pass to those sleeping children. And Mary and Blake, once strangers brought together by tragedy and chance, now moved through their shared life with the comfortable harmony of 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. As they checked on each child before retiring to their bedroom, Mary felt a familiar swell of gratitude for second chances, for brave decisions, for the unexpected turns that life sometimes took. "I love you," she whispered as Blake closed their bedroom door behind them. His smile, even after all these years, still made her heart beat faster. "And I love you, Mary Zimmerman. Today, tomorrow, always." Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance across the Oklahoma sky. The land slept beneath their light land that had witnessed struggle and triumph, beginning and renewal. Land that had become, in the truest sense, home.